What's up? Do you like the Pokemon trading card game online? Do you like when people try to make beginner's guides about battling for the Pokemon trading card game online? Well, boy, do I got the video for you. PTCGO. Yes, welcome one and all. In this video, we're going to basically show you the basics of battling in the Pokemon trading card game online. We're going to go into a tutorial battle and we're going to show you some different things. We're going to show you different parts of the battling screen. We're going to tell you what different things do, certain conditions that are in battles and stuff like that. I might not cover everything. Some things you'll just have to learn as you play, but this should give you the basics of battling. Why am I making this video? Well, for one, if you're new to the Pokemon trading card game online and you don't know what everything does, and this video could be helpful for you. And number two, I will be making some videos about the Pokemon trading card game online. And in those videos, I'm going to be referring to different things like maybe top decking or maybe saying that a card is prized. And you will follow those videos easier if you watch this video and some other videos that I will publish about just the Pokemon trading card game online. So this video has kind of helped to make it so that it's less confusing when you're watching me, so that you understand a little bit more, so it's less confusing. And if you're just getting into the Pokemon trading card game online, then this video could be helpful to you as well. All right, without further ado, let's get right into the tutorial. So here you can go under the play button. You can go on to tutorials, so we're going to do that. And here we have the tutorial. Now, I think this is the first thing you do when you create your account and you log on. This is the first place the game is going to bring you to, and it will give you some different things to look out for. But I've been playing this game for a while, so it doesn't do that for me. So here we are. This is where I'm going to show you how to get into the battle. We got Otis sitting out there looking very smug. And then we got Professor, what can we call her? We can call her Professor Emerald because of her eyes, her green eyes. We can call her Professor Emerald. Let's get right into the battle. Okay, right out the bat, some things to note. When you're battling against a real person, Otis is, listen, I don't want to hurt his feelings, but Otis isn't real. Otis is AI. When you're battling a real person, you will have to flip a coin, and the winner of the coin flip will decide who goes first and who goes second. The person who goes first cannot attack on their first turn. The person who goes second can attack on their first turn. Something to keep in mind. Okay. Also, the person who goes first cannot use any supporter cards during their first turn. The person who goes second can use a supporter card during their first turn. So that's also something to note. Here we have two options of Pokemon, Voltorb and Pikachu. Why do we have these two options? Why can't I send out Electrode? Well, at the beginning of the game, you can only send out a basic Pokemon into your active slot, right? So here we have Voltorb and Electrode, Voltorb and Pikachu, sorry. Both of these are basic Pokemon. How do I know if a Pokemon is basic or not? Well, let's get into the next section. Card details. Now, if I hover over a card, any card, it will just bring up the card a little bit bigger. But if I right click on a card, then it brings up the card in a bigger way. It's zoomed in more on the card and it doesn't sacrifice resolution for that zoom in. So here we can see different sections of the card, and look at the top left corner, basic. That's how you know if a card is basic. Next to the whether or not the card is basic, next to that little sign, you have the name of the card, and then next to that you have the HP to the top right. Then you have the art for the card, which is in the middle here, or the upper half of the card. Below that, you will see the attacks, and if there is an ability, you will typically see the ability about here. It will come above the attack. Some abilities might be elsewhere on the card, but most abilities, they go above the attacks, right? Then you have the attacks, which show you the attacks. You have the weakness, you have the resistance, you have the retreat cost, and then you have like a little description of the Pokemon on the card. Weakness and resistance, quick explanation for weakness. If you are weak to an attack's type and the attack does damage to you, the attack does double the damage it would normally do. For instance, if somebody was weak to electric and I use rollout on them, rollout would do 40 damage, which is 20 times 2. How do you know the type of attack that an attack is? The attack's type matches the type of the Pokemon that's using the attack. So any attack that my Voltorb uses will always be an electric type attack. And if I had a grass Pokemon, any attack that it uses would always be a grass type attack. Some Pokemon can have two types and some attacks can be different types than the card, but those will be specified. Forgot to put this in the video, so I'll put it in now. Resistance. Resistance is a damage reduction, but unlike the weakness where it is double the damage, with resistance it's not half the damage. It's not the inverse of 2. With resistance, it's just a flat number that gets removed from the damage that is done to you. So if a card has a resistance of 30 to grass, Anytime it's hit by a grass type attack, the attack does 30 less damage. So that's what resistance is. Now let's move on to the sections of the screen. I'll do these as they pop up. First section here, as you can see, the screen is kind of divided into two halves. There's my opponent's half and then my half. Your half will always be down here. Your opponent's half will always be up here. Will never change. On my half, you have this middle section here, this section here, and this section here. So this section in the middle here, right next to the coin, is the active slot or the active spot. This is where your active Pokemon goes. Your active Pokemon is a Pokemon that does the attacking and the Pokemon that receives damage from the opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. Now bear in mind, there are some cards in the game that can attack your bench Pokemon instead of your active Pokemon, but those will be specified when you run into them. The beauty about this game is that you can read a lot. Once you can really play this game. You just have to read what everything does. At first it will be a lot, but over time you'll be able to remember things and you'll be able to just read. And a lot of the effects are very similar. Some of them repeat. It's just that they're on different cards, but they repeat, right? So it's not too much. It's still a lot, but it's not too much. Moving on to the bench. The bench is like the warm-up area for your cards. When the active Pokemon gets knocked out, the bench Pokemon comes in to replace the active Pokemon and become the new active Pokemon. And if you do not have any cards on your bench and your active Pokemon gets knocked out, boom, you lose the game. That's it, you're out. So you always have to make sure there's something on your bench to replace the active Pokemon. On your bench, you can put energies on the Pokemon, you can evolve them, you can do pretty much anything you want to do, but you just can't attack with them. You have to wait until they go into the active slot to attack with them. So I'm gonna put Pikachu on my bench. Why did I put Voltorb in my active slot and Pikachu on my bench? Well, I have an Electrode. Electrode evolves from Voltorb, so when I put Voltorb out, I will be able to evolve it into Electrode and then attack with Electrode. If I had a Raichu in my hand, then maybe I'll put out Pikachu. More on evolving later. So when it comes to your hand, your opponent cannot see your hand and you cannot see your opponent's hand. So this is my opponent's hand, can't see it. My hand, I can see it. My opponent can see their hand, but they cannot see my hand. Both players can see both active slots and both benches. Both players can see that, but only you can see your hand and only opponent can see their hand. A lot of the rules in this game, however, can be broken, and there are cards that allow you to see your opponent's hand and vice versa. So gotta watch out for that. All right, so here we go. This is a very important note. How do we determine what cards we have in our hand? Well, you don't really get to do that. You build your deck. Your deck consists of 60 cards. When you start a game, you draw the top 7 cards of your deck. And by top 7, I don't mean like the top 7 strongest or the top 7. No, I mean the cards that are on top of your deck. The top 7 cards on the top of your deck. Those are the cards that you draw. All right, so those are the cards that you draw. If you get a basic Pokemon within that top 7, then you play that basic Pokemon as your active Pokemon, and then the game can begin. However, if you do not get an active Pokemon in your top 7, you will have to mulligan. What does mulligan mean? You have to do it over. You have to put the 7 cards back into your deck, shuffle your deck, and then draw the top 7 cards again. And then if there is still no basic Pokemon, you have to mulligan again. If there is a basic Pokemon, you don't have to mulligan that basic Pokemon because you're active Pokemon. So that's something to note. Sometimes I have decks that don't have a lot of Pokemon. If you don't have a lot of Pokemon, the chances of you having a Pokemon in the top 7 cards of your deck goes down, and if that's the case, you might have to mulligan a lot. And here's where mulliganing can get annoying. You see, for every extra time you mulligan compared to your opponent gets to draw a card, right? So for instance, if I mulligan twice and my opponent doesn't mulligan at all, that means my opponent gets to draw 2 cards, if I'm remembering this correctly. I think I am. If you mulligan 3 times and the opponent mulligans twice, your opponent gets to draw 1 card because you mulligan 1 more time than they did. So you don't want to mulligan too much sometimes, but there are strategies that you can use around that. Back in the day when I used to make mulligan decks, I would just have N, and N was a card, it's a supporter card, that reshuffled everybody's hands into their deck and drew them the amount of cards equal to their prize cards. But I'm not going to get into that right now. Just know that you have to have a basic Pokemon to start the game, and if you don't have a basic Pokemon in the top 7 cards, then you're gonna have to mulligan, and you're gonna have to mulligan until you get a basic Pokemon in the top 7 cards. So be aware of that. Alright, now let's go on to energies. What do energies do? Energies are the attack and retreat currency of this game. This game, basically, in order to use an attack, you have to have the right energy amount or energy requirement, the energy cost of that attack. For instance, roll out, it does 20 damage and it costs 2 energies, a lightning and a colorless. I don't have any colorless energies though, I only have lightning. So what do? Well, fret not, because colorless energies mean any energy. Any energy is a colorless energy. Any energy can be a colorless energy. So you're not going to see a specific colorless energy like how you see basic electric. You're not going to see a basic colorless energy. You're just going to see energies, and any energy can be a colorless energy. So keep that in mind. So if I have an electric and a grass energy, then the grass energy can count as the colorless energy. If I have electric and electric, one of the electrics counts as a colorless energy. You get that idea, all right? That's how it goes. There are special energies in this game though, and there are special colorless energies. Special colorless energies will be colorless, right? But they all have different effects that they do. Okay, more on that later when we move on to like the different category of cards. Okay, energies, you need them to attack, like I said before, but also to retreat. If you look down here at the bottom left hand corner of a card, you'll see its retreat cost. Right now my Voltorb has a retreat cost of 1, which means if I want to retreat with Voltorb, I will have to use 1 energy. And unlike your attacks, if you retreat, the energy that you use to retreat will be put into your discard pile, which is over here. There's nothing in our discard pile just yet, but I'll get into the discard pile later. But if you retreat, you lose the energy that you use to retreat. However, if you attack, you do not lose the energy that you use to attack unless stated otherwise. Typically, a lot of fire Pokemon, fire type Pokemon, they typically have attacks that cause them to discard their energies. Some electric Pokemon have those as well, but most of the times no. When you attack, you do not lose the energy, but when you retreat, you definitely lose the energy unless you have certain cards. A lot of the rules that I'm gonna say now and a lot of rules I've said so far, they can be broken by different cards in this game, which is kind of a charm of this game. There are rules and then there are things that break the rules, but for the most part, I'm just telling you the basics and what happens regularly. Alright, last thing on retreating is that retreating, when you retreat, you cure status ailments and debuffs. So if you are poisoned or you're burnt or you're confused and you retreat, you will cure that status ailment. However, if you are paralyzed or asleep, those are status ailments as well. You cannot retreat. You can't retreat if you're paralyzed, and you cannot retreat if you're asleep. Only if you're burned, poisoned, or confused, or you have a debuff on you. And then there are some cards that will say the opponent's Pokemon cannot retreat after it's been hit with this attack. Some cards are like that, so yeah. Alright, over here, you can see that these cards have a green highlight. What does that mean? The green highlight means these cards are actually usable. And if they're usable, it means you can actually use these cards in some way. If the cards don't have a green highlight, that means you can't use them. Now, pay attention to what happens when I attach an energy to Voltorb. All my energies are highlighted in green. I'm going to take an energy and attach it to Voltorb right now, and then look at my energies. Notice the green highlight has disappeared. It means I can't use these energy cards anymore. Why? Well, this is another rule of the game. You can only attach 1 energy per turn from your hand. That's basically a rule. But like I said with other rules, there are cards that can surpass or they can circumvent this by different means. Some cards allow you to just attach multiple energies in 1 turn, but for the most part, you can only attach 1. Alright, so there you go. Alright, item cards. What are item cards? Item cards are cards just like the regular Pokemon cards, but these aren't Pokemon themselves, they're actually items. And what they do is that they have special effects. You can read each item card to see what it does. So this is a switch. Switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. It just switches one of my Pokemon. And if I use a switch, it does not cost a retreat cost. I could demonstrate that, but I won't. But if I use a switch, it does not cost a retreat cost to do it. Only when I retreat manually does it cost the retreat cost. But if I switch, it doesn't. Alright, so you can bear that in mind. So item cards, just like Switch or Bike over here, they all do something special. Read what they do and you'll see where to apply them. So this one says draw cards until you have 4 cards in your hand. I already have 5 cards in my hand, and if I use this, I would have 4 cards in my hand. So I can't use this card because I have to get until I get 4 in my hand, and I already have more than 4 cards in my hand. So that's why it's not highlighted. Anyway, what do we do now? Well, we can't attack, and I can only attach 1 energy per turn, so I can't attack at all. I could retreat, but I'm not going to do that. So right now, it doesn't look like I can do much. This is what this button is for. This button is the done button. It signals that you have ended your turn. When you end your turn, your opponent's turn begins. When your opponent's turn ends, your turn begins. That's how it goes. Turn-based strategy combat. Kinda. There's a little bit of luck involved. Another thing with item cards too that I should mention is that they have no limit. You can use as many item cards as you want so long as they are usable, right? Unlike energies where you can only attach 1, item cards you can use as many as you want so long as they're actually usable. For instance, Acrobike or regular bicycle is not usable, so I can't use it. But if I had another switch, I would be able to use 2 switches, right? So my turn is done, I will click done, and my opponent's turn will begin. But watch what is going to happen here. 47 decks in my opponent's hand. By the way, you can see the deck number of cards in your deck up here and down here. This is yours, is your opponent's. And this is the amount of cards in your discard pile. This is yours, down here, this is your opponents. Thank you, Otis, for being so patient. I will now end my turn. But take a look at what happens over here when Otis's turn begins. Take a look. What is happening? Look at my deck. See that? So at the beginning of each player's turn, that player draws a card. That's something that is always going to happen, all right? So Otis drew a card at the beginning of his turn, and I drew a card at the beginning of my turn. So that's something to keep in mind. That's how you kind of get cards in your hand from your deck, okay? And you should take note of that. So I'm going to attach an energy to my Voltorb here. And then this card is now highlighted in green, which means I can use it. This is Electrode. It's a Pokemon card, and it evolves from Voltorb. I can use Electrode to evolve Voltorb. Remember in Dragon Ball Z, when Frieza had the different forms and Piccolo should have beat him in the second form, but Piccolo allowed him to transform and then Piccolo got bodied? Yeah, these Pokemon have forms just like Frieza, right? But basically, you cannot evolve a Pokemon the turn it was put into play. A Pokemon has to spend at least one turn on the field before it can get to evolve. Voltorb has already spent a turn on the field, so Voltorb can evolve. But if Voltorb just came out this turn, I would not be able to evolve it, right? There are some situations where you might want to evolve your Pokemon and some situations where you might want to hold off. You'll see those as they come up, but for now, I'm going to evolve because it's safe for me to evolve, so I'll do that. Now, if I use Bicycle, I'll have 3 cards. So I won't use it just yet. I won't use it right now because I want to draw more cards with Bicycle. Something to note about evolving is that evolving, similar to retreating, cures status ailments. But unlike retreating, where you can't retreat if you're paralyzed or asleep, you can evolve if you're paralyzed and you're asleep, and it will cure the status ailments. So evolving cures all status ailments, and it's very useful. If your Pokemon is debuffed in some way, evolving also cures it. Like, say for instance, your opponent used a move that trapped your Pokemon. Your Pokemon is not able to retreat after getting hit with an attack. If you evolve your Pokemon will now be able to retreat. So you can keep that in mind. Oh yeah, and earlier I said Pokemon that are asleep or paralyzed cannot retreat. You can still use a card to get them out of the active slot. You can still use a card to switch them. You just can't manually retreat with those cards. Something to note. So I will go ahead and use Static Shock. Oh, and also, when you attack, your turn ends. So make sure you do all that you need to do, then attack. Or else you will attack and still have things that you need to be done, and those won't be done. So make sure that you evolve, and then, or make sure that you do everything you need to do, then you attack. Alright? Attacking will end your turn. Okay, what do we have here? They used a potion to heal the damage that I did, but this is a supporter card. This supporter card is called Giovanni's Scheme. A supporter card is a type of trainer card, and very similar to item cards, they have different things that they do. This supporter card has 2 options. Not all of them will have 2 options, but this one in particular has 2 options. It's called Giovanni's Scheme. Supporter cards tend to be stronger than item cards in what they do. It's just that supporter cards, you only get 1 per turn, or you can only use 1 supporter card per turn. You can have a lot of supporter cards in your hand, but you can only use 1 of them per turn, unless otherwise stated. There is a card, Magnazone, with dual brains that allows you to use 2 supporter cards in 1 turn, but hey, that card costs a lot to get on the field. So here I'm gonna use Giovanni's Scheme, and I'm gonna do 20 more damage to my opponent's Pokemon before applying weakness or resistance. What does before applying weakness or resistance mean, huh? Well, if you look at it, it's pretty, well, it's simple to me because I've played it before. But basically, you can do damage before applying weakness and resistance, or after applying weakness and resistance. Basically what that means is that if you do it before applying weakness or resistance, you have the base damage plus the extra damage, and then you will calculate the damage it does if the opponent is weak or if it resisted. However, if it's after weakness or resistance, you have the base damage, then the weakness and resistance calculation, and then the extra damage that you do is done on top of that. So for argument's sake, let's say this Pokemon was weak to electric and I used Electro Ball. Electro Ball would do 60 damage. With the extra 20 damage, Electro Ball before applying weakness and resistance would do now 80 damage. It's 60 plus 20. And then after, if this Pokemon is weak to electric, after I do the damage, it gets double damage, so it would take 160 damage from this. However, if it was after, what would happen is that I would do 60 damage at base, then the weakness would double that to 120, and then I would do 20 extra damage to do 140. So that's what applying weakness or resistance means, before or after. Nice thing to know. So this one does before, and typically you want it to, if you're doing damage, you want it to be before applying weakness and resistance. But not all cards do this. Some cards do after. Okay, so now I do juiced up damage, big man damage, and now I will use acrobike, or not acrobike, bicycle. And I get an Eevee. Let's put Eevee on the bench. Alright, how do you knock out Pokemon in this game? Very straightforward. Attacks have damage. The damage of the attack will put damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon. If the opponent has damage counters equal to or greater than their HP, which is this number here, then they will get knocked out. Currently, I have 3 damage counters on my Electrode. A damage counter is 10 damage, and all the damage in this game is done in multiples of 10. So there is no 65, 73, 69, there's none of that. All of the damage is done in increments of 10. So there's only 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way, increments of 10, multiples of 10. So I have 3 damage counters on me right now, so I'm not going to get knocked out. This guy has no damage counters on him, but I used Electro Ball, which was 60 damage, plus Giovanni's Scheme, which was an extra 20, so I do 80 damage, and this thing has 70 HP, which means it will have 8 damage counters on it, which is going to be enough to knock it out if my math adds up. Let's see. Electro Ball, 80 damage, there goes the Scyther. Now we have come to prize cards. Prize cards are cards that you get for knocking out Pokemon. Based on the category of Pokemon that you knocked out, you will get a different number of prize cards. Regular cards, you will get 1 prize card for knocking them out. Pokemon EXs, Pokemon GXs, Pokemon Vs. If you knock out any of those, you take 2 prize cards. And then Pokemon Tag Team GXs or Pokemon V Maxes will give you 3 prize cards if you knock them out. Why are prize cards important? If you are able to take all 6 of your prize cards, you win the game. That's one way to win this game. So I'm going to take 1 prize card. I normally take the first. You don't know what is on each card. There is a card in this game called Town Map that allows you to put all your prize cards face up so you can see them, but I don't have that card in this deck because it's just a training thing, and I basically don't know what card is which, so I'm just going to pick this card over here. Here we go, Professor's Letter. Now it is my opponent's turn. They use roller skates. Interesting, interesting. Ah, it didn't work. Ah, headbutt. You watch it with a headbutt. Ooh, Evo Soda. So Evo Soda is a card that you can use. You can read what it does there. You can use a card. It's basically a card that searches for an evolution and evolves your Pokemon. Now I'm gonna use that card right now to get Raichu. So we've seen the active slot, we've seen the bench, we've seen the hand, and we've seen prize cards. But what are these 2 over here? This is your deck. You can't see the cards in your deck, but you built your deck so you know what cards are in it. You just don't know if the card is in your deck or if it's in your prize cards. Because remember, your prize cards are drawn from your deck. So if you need a card that's in your deck that is good and you need it to knock out a Pokemon and it's prized, you're in a problem because you can only get the card to knock out the Pokemon if you knock out the Pokemon, but you can't knock out the Pokemon without the card because it's in the prize card. It's the whole thing. The prize cards, how do these come up? Where did these come from? After you have drawn the first 7 cards and gotten a basic Pokemon, then the next 6 cards on top of your deck become your prize cards. So that's where these came from. Now your deck, you can't see it. You don't know what cards are in it technically. You can have a wild guess, but you don't know exactly which ones are there. However, there are cards in the game, for example, Professor's Letter, that allow you to search your entire deck. Now, Professor's Letter says search your deck, search your deck. If the card said search your deck, you don't have to just go for energy cards. You can literally search your deck for all the cards that are there. You can't draw them. The only things you can draw are energy cards, but you at least know which cards are in your deck, and that is very helpful, right? For instance, if I look here, I can see that I don't have any more Electrode. So it doesn't make sense for me to use an Evo Soda if I have a Voltorb because there is no Electrode to evolve it into. So that is something that you can keep in mind. Okay, so just seeing your deck will alert you as to what cards are there, and that can help you make better decisions while you play. Alright, I will attach an energy to my Raichu. Alright, retreat costs. I'm going to show you one thing retreat costs. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm going to say it again just in case I didn't. You can only retreat once per turn, right? So right now, I could retreat. However, Electrode has no retreat costs, which means I'm not going to lose any energies by retreating because there are no energies to lose. So I'll retreat into my Raichu. But look at this. I can't retreat with Raichu. It's not giving me the option. I'm clicking on it. It's not giving me the option to retreat, right? So how do I retreat back into Electrode if I wanted to do that? Well, the switch you can use as many times as you want, regardless of whether you've retreated or not. So I can just retreat back out into Electrode. So sometimes, what I did look pointless, but sometimes it can be a very good play. For instance, if you are confused and when you're confused, this is how confusion works. If you're confused, you flip a coin. You flip a coin when you're going to attack. If you get heads, you attack. Nothing bad. But if it's tails, you don't attack and you hurt yourself. You put 3 damage counters on yourself. So a confusion basically makes it such that even the strongest cards might do nothing because they get tails when they flip the coin. So confusion is a very annoying status ailment. So one thing you could do, retreat into the Pokemon on your bench, thus curing the confusion, then switch back out into that Pokemon that's on your bench, and now it can attack and it got rid of confusion. So double switching can definitely help you in certain scenarios, as well as a lot of other mechanics. Double switching also enables you to use certain attacks twice in a row that you shouldn't be able to. You'll see it in a future video when I make a video on Zacian. You'll see how that deck works. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's attack this Dino for 60 damage. Dino is down. I will draw this card down here. And now my opponent has just Weedle and Triple Stab. So it looks like we're gonna take this W. Alright, Voltorb. Thank you, Otis, even though you're very smug looking. Thank you back there. Oh, Pokemon Center. Let me use that and heal. There we go. Winning in style. Alright, so I remember when I said if you draw 6 prize cards, if you take all your prize cards, not just 6, sometimes people can add prize cards to your prize cards, but you typically have 6. If you draw all your prize cards and you take all your prize cards, you win. There is another win condition in this game, however. If you knock out your opponent's active Pokemon and they don't have any Pokemon on the bench to replace that active Pokemon, then they automatically lose. And you will see that happen right now. I won because they didn't have anything on their bench, right? There is another win condition in this game. I'm gonna briefly touch it. Remember when I said you draw a card from the top of your deck at the start of your turn? If you are supposed to do that at the beginning of your turn, you're supposed to draw a card from the top of your deck, but there are no cards in your deck, then guess what happens? Well, what happens is that you basically lose because you have to draw a card and there are no cards in your deck. There's something I forgot, so I'm gonna just go back into another game. Alright, so over here, what's this section? This section is your discard pile, and this is the place that cards that you have used will go. Any trainer card that you use goes back into your discard pile unless it states otherwise, and if your Pokemon it gets knocked out, then it goes into your discard pile along with all cards that were attached to it. So your energies go into your discard pile, any 2 cards that are attached to it goes into your discard pile, and don't be cheeky and think, oh, what if I evolve a Pokemon? Do both of them go into the discard pile when they get knocked out? Yes, they do. Both Pokemon will go. All of the cards, because they're essentially like one card, all the cards in the active slot, if your Pokemon gets knocked out, they will go into your discard pile unless otherwise stated. That's something I forgot to mention. I'll put it here. Alright, I think I covered everything I wanted to. That was just a basic battle. Battles can get a lot more complex than that, and as you play, you'll learn to anticipate more, you'll learn to read the game a little bit more, and you should just read a lot of the cards and see what they do, right? But for now, that's just a basic introduction to the battling in the Pokemon trading card game online. Alright? Now, I plan to do more tutorials about this or about other parts of this game. Not too long. I don't want to make them too long and I don't want to put too much out there, but just to ease you into the game and make sure that you're not confused when you're watching me. Okay? For now, that's going to be it. Stay safe out there. Show respect where it is due. Remember that electric field strength is equivalent to force per unit charge. I am the Hopeful Entertainer, and hopefully you have been entertained.